We are a hardware-based layer 0. And so we call ourselves a layer 0 again because we're the lowest layer. We're below layer 1s. And we do start everything that we do at a hardware basis. That means security. That means identity we talked about. It means authorization. So I threw out kind of some of the things in the first iteration of the internet. All that happens at a hardware basis. There are different trust levels along the network architecture. So it's both vertically and horizontally scaling. It is a complete mesh network all the way out to the edge. And then I would say that if we talked about our sense of centralization or data center, you would have data centers that are no bigger than like a couple cargo containers, if that. So you want many of them. You want them wide dispersed. And that's for redundancy, distribution, attack vector, single point of failure, everything that we've covered today. The devices themselves are, I think I mentioned this again in the first session, they are FIPS 140-2 Type 3, which is a very high rating, currently deployed in different military settings. They're really, really pretty unbelievable hardware devices. That acts as the master controller on the network to disseminate in a P2P environment, enclose encrypted information. You think of highly sensitive information. From there, we have like a worker node concept, very similar to Kubernetes, if you can think of that, where you're using additional resources, which has to connect to a master or to a secure enclave. Those additional resources will be used in much more untrusted environments. And what I mean by that is like, again, I said this earlier, you don't need to secure your personal data at the same level that you're securing a public-facing website. And so what's happening here is that companies, individuals are choosing what level of trust they want to operate and what action they're taking, and then it's up to the secure enclave to direct and ping to resources to disseminate what can be used and how it can be used across that. From an economic perspective, I mentioned this too, we are turning cost centers into profit centers. So this ability is that you take businesses, you take anyone that has a house, a home, a business, a building, commercial building, a 7-Eleven, it doesn't really matter what it is. And you go back on-prem, you secure your data, you have control over your data, and then it turns it into a mining operation. So very similar to Bitcoin, if we talk about that, there is no pre-sale of tokens. There is no sale of token at all. Every token that's generated will be mined based off of a proof of economic activity. It's how the reason I was focused on GDP is that's how GDP is measured and quantified. So it's your proof of growing GDP, and therefore you are rewarded with a network token. So what do you want to do? How do you win? How do you generate value? How do you generate the token? You bring economic activity in. What's economic activity? It's anything that transacts value, okay? And so we have everything, from smart meters to trust bridges to, these are all components and factors of the overall architecture that allow you to move all the way into POSs, point of sales, capturing value that could be at, from a coffee shop all the way up to a corporate enterprise. And then even further to state, local, and federal government. So there's really not a form factor that can't run on this architecture, which is powerful. I'm not saying they're going to adopt. I'm saying that we have the ability to walk in, talk to CTOs, CISOs, and prove that the security is at or above what they currently have today. From there, we have, again, we talked about the turning cost centers into profit centers. This is a really big economic factor because most people have asked, why would people go back on-prem? And I think the first thing I said was, well, they're already thinking about it because they're trying to solve for the issues that they have today. But the second piece is that if I can say, let's add a brand new revenue stream that you don't have today to your current model, how does that sound? And those conversations have gone very well. We're launching in Q1 of 25. I would also tell you that we've got about 35 different conversations with MOUs with businesses. The total amount of economic value that would be in that, and again, this is pre-launch, is about 300 million of revenue. It's a very large amount of economic value that could be moving through the network very quickly. And I would say the only reason we get to have those conversations is because we've taken a security-first approach. If we didn't take that and we weren't having the emphasis on things that they're used to seeing today and guaranteeing that we can, to the most of our ability, secure that value, you just wouldn't have the conversations. And so we're very thankful for the team and what has been designed here. We talked a little bit about the reward system. So the other thing that we did uniquely is that there is a token, and that will be disseminated for, again, capture of value across the network. Also, it'll act like kind of like the network currency, so all settlement will be done in it. There's also an additional second asset, which is the internal rewards network token. And so you have an actual internal token that's CNDT, and then you have an internal reward asset that can be used internally, just like you have airline miles. So the example that I give, because everyone's like, well, great, what do I do with this thing? Is if I'm sitting here and I am operating inside of the Conduit network, transacting economic activity, and I obtain these points, and I am hosting a website. And so and let's say that Ben is that provider inside the network as well, I can turn around and take my points, and instead of spending with Conduit or any other any other transmission of value, I would spend with my points. And the point is that the points that I obtain in the current state, the current regulations, are non-taxable. And so I just took a OpEx of my hosting, and I was able to take those points and spend at Ben, who is also in network. Then Ben can go spend at the next one. So what you want to do, and everyone's like, well, who's going to come on to this network? The reality is most things in the world today and the internet today must run on servers. Everything ends at a server somewhere. Question is, who owns the server, right? The cloud is not the cloud. It's just someone else's server. What we're doing is putting that server power back in the hands of individuals so that they can own their data, so they can monetize that, so they can participate within this network. We are a full replacement for AWS and Azure, as an example, using them kind of as the marker. And so what can you run on it? We can run anything. Anything that you currently run on the internet today. We've talked about, we have our own identity server, so we have a concept for that that's been worked on. We have our own authorization server that's been worked on. We are a DLT. I'm glad that Ken talked about that. It's again, built from the ground up. It's a temporal database, uses PetriNet theory, hyper efficient. So we talk about mining. This is probably another, this is on our website, but a really good thing to note. It's about 1,800 times more efficient than Bitcoin in its mining. So we can run our algorithm off of about 5 watts, which means that the power and consumption is not going towards solving a complex mathematical equation like Bitcoin. It's going towards resources that the network would need, that someone would need to be purchasing. And all we're doing is quantifying the amount of economic activity that is going across the network and then rewarding through a set mining schedule, which you can also see online. We are in a pre-sale of our in-home devices. I don't know if we've got oh, look at that. Oh. A little transparent, but that's okay. Of our in-home devices. Again, I talked about horizontal and vertical. Yeah, that'll work. That's great. This is one form factor, right? So you've got a Wi-Fi head unit up top, Wi-Fi 7, correct? Yeah, it's Wi-Fi 7. The middle module, by the way, these are magnetic and stackable. Middle module is the secure enclave. Lower module is general compute. And so this would be like a perfect edge device that people would put in their homes. They'd have their closed loop network. They're going to have all of their identity, their wallets, their bank account information. Again, anything that's highly trusted or need to be highly secured would be in that middle module. And then the lower module could be something that they use at home for their general network, or the likelihood would be that they would be using it or letting the network use it as a edge device for transmitting, and then they could be mining, as an example. Do you need to be doing your own economic activity in order to get mining? No. But your device does need to be involved in the transmission of economic activity. Make sense, kind of? Now, if you are bringing the economic activity, you're going to mine much more. So the play here would be to be both sides, right? DePin, one of the DePin's issue is that it's a double-sided market. So that's supply and demand. What's interesting is why I say cost centers to profit centers is the real target here is the people that have economic activity that are looking to increase a boost on that, and now they're fulfilling both sides of the market. They're supply side and they're also the demand side. We also have a node 0. I don't think we have a picture of that. It's a software. This would be, again, the ability to take over an existing resource that you have. It does take over the entire OS, so that device is no longer usable in any other form or fashion. Okay, it is the networks. Those node 0s must connect to a either secure enclave or a core, one of the two, because it has a secure enclave. And that thing will, again, use it as a resource across the network. And then we've got complete scalability from there. And so going all the way up into what we call mini data centers. And how you would do that is, let's say you took a rack of computers, kind of like similar to what's running this place right here in this entire wall. So an example here is that, Michael, how often does this screen run in an average day? In use, sorry. 3 hours. So it's on 24/7, runs 3 hours. There's a whole lot of compute and GPUs sitting in that server room that's unused. So part of the concept here is when it's not being used, and you can see this everywhere around the world with a lot of different things. When it's not being used, what if those same resources that are sitting there latent are used on the network? And now we've just created a brand new revenue stream for Vossler in the times that they are not using this beautiful screen. And that's just one, you can see it everywhere. You can see that a 7-Eleven, as an example, that has unused space, or commercial buildings. Specifically right now, there's a lot of people that are not in commercial buildings after COVID, right? Those are perfect opportunities for data centers. And so when I talk about scalability, everyone says, well, what's the next form factor? Because you saw one form factor. That's not the question. It's 3 questions. How much space do you have, physical? How much internet? Like, what is the connectivity? And it's not that it's necessarily a hinge point, but there's a reason why we ask that. And the third thing is, what's the power coming in? Then you build with doing the minimal amount of TI. You build a rig that fits that, and you move on to the next location. So you don't go build new buildings. You don't go build data centers. You use the massive amount of latent infrastructure that is sitting in our world today. Look at this city. Look at all these buildings. Look at all the power that's sitting there. You use that, and you maximize it, and you move to the next location. And now you've got a highly distributed web of data centers and compute that can be monetized. And you have brand new revenue streams for people that didn't have that on the business or the building before.